Verbo. All right, thank you so much. And Mapbox. Hey. So make sure to connect with our community partners here. This is the opportunity for those connections to be had. All right, thank you to our community and startup partners, Bunker Labs. Bunker Labs, woo! There we are. Galvanize, hey. Joy Organics, and the Texas Veterans Commission. So like I said, welcome to Veterans in Tech. My name is Maria Brown-Spence. I'm the founder and executive director of Hearts to Heal, a 501c3 nonprofit located right in Austin, Texas. We use a peer support model to connect those that are experiencing mental health problems or bereavement issues with a mentor in the community so they can navigate that space in a transparent and honest way. And once we do that, we lead them to community resources. And I spent my time 6 years in the Texas Army National Guard. Oh, thank you, thank you. And I'm the proud daughter of 2 Marines. Yes, I knew it was gonna happen. Both my parents were in the Marine Corps, and everyone asked me, like, how did that happen? How did you go to the Army when your parents were in the Marine Corps? It's simple, I knew better. I wanted to go to the military. I didn't want to be a Marine, and growing up, I knew those things. So, hey, I know the Marines are gonna be pretty mad at me right now, but it's all right. I live with them. Well, I don't live with them anymore, but I did. And that's me, look, yay. Taking selfies. My commander never liked that, but it's okay. All right, so around the room you will see a legend, and with that legend, it'll identify the different branches of service. So make sure to connect with your fellow veterans, even if they were in a different branch than you. It's okay. We want to create a safe space for you all. Who's laughing? Is that a Marine? Let me see that. Army, oh, I thought it was gonna be a Marine. I see one right there. All right, so this is a brief agenda we're gonna go over. You also have these paper form right when you came in, so you can feel free to look at that, but we'll also keep you updated along the way. So we took care of registration, lunch, network, and optional tours. Raise your hand if you went on a tour. Pretty neat? I didn't even get to go yet, so hopefully I'll get to check that out after. We're gonna have opening remarks from Craig Cummings with Capital Factory. We're gonna have a keynote chat with Kelly Perdue, Moonshots Capital. We're gonna have service, startups, and tech, a veterans military transition fireside chat, and questions and answering. So use this opportunity to pick the innovative and brilliant minds that are here today in this room to help you along your journey with whatever that may be. We have social impact in service and in tech, epic office hours or panels and networking. Also elevating underrepresented voices in tech and innovation. Bunker Connect, intentional networking. As you can see, a common theme here, networking, networking, network. It is truly key. Startup showcase and pitch competition, panel judges, startups, and then we're gonna have Bunker Brews happy hour. So don't try to leave early, because that's important, right? That's what we're all waiting for, I know. Not the networking, but the happy hour. So I would like to take the floor with Craig Cummings. Craig Cummings is the general partner for Moonshots Capital, Austin, Texas. Craig actively invests in and advises technology startups, many of which are founded by military veteran entrepreneurs through his company, Moonshots Capital, which he co-founded with Kelly Perdue. Craig is the co-founder, along with Joseph Kopser, and former chief operating officer at Ride Scout, a mobile app that shows users how to get from point A to point B by providing a real-time ground transportation information. Ride Scout was acquired by Daimler Mercedes-Benz in September 2014 and recently merged with Globe Sherpa to form Movo in America. Thank you, Craig Cummings.
Great to see everybody here today. It's starting to feel a little family-like. Is it just me? I mean, it's already family-like because we're all veterans, or many of us are veterans, but it's also like we're seeing more of each other, and you can feel this whole community coming together. So thanks. This is an awesome turnout. Fantastic. So I want to double down on the thanks to Microsoft. Again, hands up for Microsoft. We want all the startups to actually see you. If you didn't get the word, they just won the largest technical contract in the history of the Department of Defense, the JEDI contract for $10 billion. And do we know if it's being appealed yet? No word yet. Apparently, it was your partnership with Capital Factory that got it across the finish line. But sincerely, the timing is pretty amazing that you're a new partner to Capital Factory, all this energy around the defense space, and we do want to be part of that story, however we can make you be successful, and give our best to Lee Madden, too. Next, I'm going to thank Capital Factory. Like Josh Baer, who's at Google today, the answer is always yes to the veteran community, always. We want to host an event here. We want to do this. Will you support us? Will you partner with us? And Josh always says yes. And so thanks to the Capital Factory and the Josh Baer. Josh asked me about 3 years ago to be his Director of Military and Veteran Affairs. And what started off as like a part-time job practically became a full-time job. And you can see how over time, like it just an amazing surge in activity among veteran and defense and intel community and U.S. government here at the Capital Factory. So I feel fortunate to have had that job, to be what he calls his military Sherpa. And I continue to do that job today, which is sort of what I'm doing here with you. I also want to thank Min, right here, little hand wave, and Deja for putting together today's event. Min has done a number of these events now and just does an outstanding job. And we did this in Dallas a few months ago. You did a great job, so thank you. I also want to thank, on that note, Google for Startups and Verbo, because they've been so supportive to our diversity efforts here at the Capital Factory, and great partners. So yesterday was a special day, I think, for all of us, whether you're a veteran or not. And for me in particular, I always reflect on my family. My father was an Air Force officer. Both of my brothers went to West Point and were career Army officers, and my mom worked for the Department of the Army for 25 years. So my standing joke is we don't have family reunions, we have family formations, which you all could appreciate. But it definitely, whether I knew it at the time or not, it definitely inspired me to join the military and go to West Point myself. And I ended up to be God's capital, but the other finished teaching when I literally, and you guys can understand, but the winner of Kelly's of West Point class of 19 to be continued on is in the private sector of Los Angeles. So Kelly we're like herding a bunch of cats. We said we should organize our efforts here a little bit. Started to a little north of $11 million now. Let us know if you want to invest a little. Thesis of military
capital investor, VC. It's a hot topic. We always have the community bustling to ask the questions about investing and raising and fundraising and all that. So we're going to get to your questions, and there's going to be a little time for Q&A at the end. But I wanted to start with entrepreneurship. And so if you can explain a little bit about what point in your life or your career did you discover that entrepreneurship was a path you were going to pursue?
So I remember the exact day and time that I decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And could I get a quick show of hands? I like to understand friendlies and enemies. Army? Go Army.
Oh, man.
Navy? Couple of Navies. Air Force? Oh, like Air Force, like outnumbering the Navy here. That's pretty amazing. I just as I start peppering in comments, I want to know who I got to watch out for. So, so I was in law and business school at UCLA and had been working at a firm called Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, which is a large national law firm. And we were at something called the printers. So this was a long time ago. And the printers is when you do big deals. There are a lot of legal documents involved with them, and everybody's got to agree on it. So they bring all the accountants and all the attorneys from all the different parties involved to this place called the printers, where you stay for about 3 or 4 days, and you just go through iterations of them. And they take care of you with nice food and a nice place, and it's kind of a commodity, so they try to upsell you on all the other stuff. And we'd been there 3 days, and I was just, doing, 20 hours a week, so I was part-time, but this was a really cool deal, and I was getting to see the lawyer side of it. And the principals of the company that was being acquired came in, and there was a Texas company, and it was the CEO and the CFO, and they were wearing suits with cowboy boots, cigars, and this was like 8 a.m. because we were going to get to the closing. They come walking in. They hadn't been there the entire time, but they come in for the last final for signing everything. And all of the non-entrepreneurs, all the service providers were, had been there for 3 days, sleeves turned up, a mess. And the partner from the Gibson law firm, and I think it was Skadden Arps was the other law firm, were on the final throes of arguing about where a comma went, was and that comma or and comma that, and how it impacted the meaning of it. And the Texas CFO leaned into the CEO and he goes, "Can you believe we're paying these sons of bitches $600 an hour to argue about where a comma goes?" And you could literally see the light bulb on, come in. I'm like, I want to be those people, not those people. So I didn't know everything that meant at the time. I'd seen my father be a land developer and very entrepreneurial, but and that was a long time ago. So over the last 20 plus years, I've been a part of a founding or a senior leader of 10 different startups.
That's amazing. You never know where the inspiration is going to strike, but that was your point.
That was the point in time where everything shifted.
Okay, all right. Well, let's fast forward into decided you're going to go for it. You're building the thing. You talk about impeccability with an MVP, and I think for a lot of us, we're excited about our idea, and sometimes we just have this picture of what it is going to be, and we skip MVP. So what is the balance there with going for an MVP but getting it impeccable?
Yeah, I try to preach impeccability all the time. You've heard a lot of the sayings. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and you always put your best foot forward. There are a bunch of different ones, but as someone who spends a lot of their day, every day, meeting would-be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are trying to raise money, and literally over a month we see 100 to 200 different deals come through. So you break that down into the workday elements and how many different, what that flow is like. You get something with improper grammar, misspelled words, kind of lack of follow-up, slides that clearly weren't, didn't have time spent on them to do right. You absolutely need to manage the tension between, you have to prioritize and you can only do some things. You only have 24 hours in a day and you have to get the important stuff done. But in those moments where you're delivering a product that represents who you are and what you want to do to the people that are important and have a decision-making capability, delivering something at a very high standard does a whole lot of things. It lets me know that you think it's important enough to have done it correctly. And when you're operating with a team, which everybody has to do, nobody's an entrepreneur by themselves, the level of your game impacts the level of everybody's game that's on your team and that's around you. So very rarely does somebody exceed kind of the standard that you set with how you operate. So it's really important for a lot of different reasons. The ramification of you acting impeccably is super important. Now, you tied that to MVP, which is minimum viable product, something that you get out and kind of throw stuff at it to see if it works, get customer feedback and get something operating. You absolutely have to make a decision at some point in time that you're going to put whatever you have up, and you got to manage that against your resources, how good it is compared to what the competition's got, and what you think you need to show in order to get the next level of momentum going, whether it's attracting capital, attracting other talent, whatever it might be, getting a customer to buy in. That minimum viable product is, by its own definition, the minimum thing you need to be able to execute. But whatever you put up, it needs to be done really well.
Yeah, and I love what you touched on earlier on with your team and building a team. So obviously with you and Craig, who have both been on the board of Bunker Labs, by the way, thank you for your service in that capacity. building a team that functions well, that covers the bases for what you're building together is really important. Co-founding teams, adding team members. I think you talk a lot about hiring domain expertise early on. What can you share about that and how important it is?
So the thesis for Craig's and my investments through Moonshots Capital is that we want only extraordinary leaders. And the way we came to this thesis was in looking at the 87 now deals that we've invested in, whether as individual angels through the syndicate Craig described or through the fund. If you do a regression analysis and analyze how they turned out, because we do have investments that went poorly, and we do have investments that went, IPO and or significant returns on acquisition, and there's a whole spectrum of that success. If you, like we did, went and said, okay, what at the time of investment, what factor could we control for that would show us or would indicate that there was a likelihood it would end up on the good side of that spectrum? Quality of leadership was the number one factor that at the time of investment, if we can evaluate and understand that and it's got a high grade, it's more likely than not to end up on the far side. And remember, we're early stage technology, so there's a long way to go from here to success, and leadership is critical. It's the thing that matters the most in making it occur. We're obviously jaded in that we think, okay, the only place in the world where millions of dollars is spent training people in leadership is in the military. We have a pretty good conduit to that. Let's take advantage of that and use that as our investment thesis, not only because we think it's great to be able to give back, but, oh, guess what? They perform better, and that's what our numbers show from our investment. So leadership traits and leadership qualities are incredibly important, and there are all different types of leaders. I have personally found success, and in Craig's and my discussions, how he's found success is understanding what you do really well and then surrounding yourself with the people that can do those things that you don't do as well. And if you can actually find somebody that does everything, the people that do everything better than you, and you can focus on, as the leader, the leadership portion, instead of the actual doing of the tasks, you're going to be much better off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in your book, Take Command, you talk about a lot of those qualities and skills. And I know that you've also been asked in several interviews if being a veteran contributed to your success in The Apprentice. So when you're looking at in your investments or in companies for leadership, how do you assess those qualities and how do you find them in others?
So that's a pretty broad question. I want to touch on something at the beginning of your question. So right after The Apprentice, I went on what they call like media tours, and it was basically to promote the next apprentice. Imagine that, my former boss wanting to promote something. He had something. But I kept getting the question, hey, do you think your military background helped you on the task? And I started off answering it kind of smiling with a good, of course, military. And then I eventually got kind of fed up with the question. I'm like, how does everybody not understand the leadership qualities that the military instills in you, trains you for? Like, how is that missing? Like, part of it could come from what happens in Hollywood in terms of how military people are portrayed in movies. But I think it's just basic ignorance. And so that actually is what precipitated me writing the book about applying military leadership principles to business. And I went and found very, very successful business leaders who were military veterans, like Roger Staubach, Ross Perot, Bill Coleman from BEA Systems, all successful military veterans in the commercial world. And I said, hey, I'm just a guy who won a reality show. You guys have built billion-dollar businesses. Do you agree that these are what helped you to do that, and how did they help you? And that's what the book component was about. So it wasn't, oh, let me write a book because people who win a reality show write a book. It was actually very focused on entrepreneurship and applying military leadership principles to building your business. So it was a very important component to that.
Right, absolutely. Well, so how much of the traits in your book are what you're looking for as a VC, though?
So the 10 leadership characteristics are critical for leadership, and it goes from perseverance, planning, your integrity, you described impeccability. All of these things are what we look for when we're talking to an entrepreneur. Technical and tactical proficiency. You better be able to talk to number level, pixel level detail of the business that you're going out for, understanding the customers. Integrity is something that we won't budge on in any way, shape, or form, and most VCs I know feel that way as well. These aren't like rocket science ahas, and it's exhibiting those and us being able to get background checks on those. So, for instance, it's known that Moonshots Capital invests in military veterans, and we lean into it, and we want to look for those. Techstars New York, Y Combinator, 500 startups, Bunker Labs. Every cohort that comes into Techstars, say Techstars New York, most of us would be able to, with 90% accuracy, describe them. There's 2 fintech, there's 2 healthcare, there's 1 AI, there's 1 AR, and pick a new technology sector every 6 months to a year, and there's going to be 1 or 2 of those companies. And there are literally 100 VCs that service each of those sectors. And you can look in PitchBook or Crunchbase and go try to find those VCs. But the cohort at Techstars New York is sitting with, a former Navy SEAL that's one of those, say it's a fintech company. It doesn't matter what company it is. But when they're talking about that person's experiences in Afghanistan, go, you got to talk to Moonshots Capital. It stands out, it's above what's going on. And then a very interesting thing ensues. That former operator uses their background network, in the military to check on Craig and I from our background, and we do the same thing on them. So if they both get, you want them in your foxhole from their respective networks, now I'm meeting an entrepreneur's meeting me, and if we go through then the VC dance of the total addressable market, how can Moonshots Capital help you? And we go through all that, and we still want to invest, and we get to investing. We get to a point where it's very possible that founder trusts their lead VC more than they trust their co-founder, which is very unusual, rarely can happen. But the DNA that we all share is something that eclipses mere business operations or anything else. So it's what we consider to be a pretty significant advantage.
Very significant. All right, well, let's shift over to fundraising. You recently raised a fund for Moonshots Capital. What are your biggest lessons learned from pitching and fundraising that can be applied to the startups that are in the room?
So I wrote a Medium blog post specifically on the fun that Craig and I had raising our first venture fund.
The fun in fundraising.
Fun and fundraising. You might have heard, if you're close to any VCs, that it's vulture capital. They don't have a lot of empathy, or don't take much pity in your plight of trying to raise money from your company, and it comes directly from attempting to raise the venture fund. It is 5-10x times more difficult to get a first venture fund raised, despite significant track records with investing, significant networks in the community, significant background working together. It's very, very hard to do. And the leadership characteristics that we look for are similar to what LPs, our limited partners, which are the people who put money into venture funds, look for. They want high integrity, high attention to detail. They're going to want reporting components. They want a history and a track record of investing together. They want a strategy and a thesis for why and how Craig and I are going to be able to find and convince the most audacious entrepreneurs to let us be the ones that invest in their company. So the way we built Moonshots, to invest with conviction, to want to take a board seat, to want to come in and help do heavy lifting with the companies on whatever they need, whether that's fighting with co-founders, hiring their first sales personnel, understanding how and why and what they should look like to raise the next round of financing. These are things that first-time, second-time entrepreneurs don't know and don't understand, and the things that we try to jump in with both feet and help to do. And having a referenceable, at the time, 60-plus entrepreneurs that would say, yeah, Kelly and Craig come do exactly what they say they do, was super helpful in helping us be successful in closing that first fund.
That's excellent. Are we pretty close to Q&A time? Okay. All right. 3 minutes, we'll answer one more question from the talking points then. What is one of your biggest mistakes or deals that you've passed on, and what did you learn?
So one of the biggest mistakes that I passed on, how many people have been to Los Angeles? How many people love the traffic in Los Angeles? So I was invited to drive down to Orange County on a Friday afternoon to hear this super hot deal as an angel, and I was writing $25,000 checks, and I thought about it. I had 2 or 3 other angel buddies tell me this is a super hot deal. I got to go see it. I got to go meet them. I talked to them on the phone to them briefly, but I never really wanted to invest in anything unless I could look the entrepreneur in the eye and kind of get full radar on, is this person legit? Is this person significant? And I chose on a Friday afternoon probably to go to a happy hour instead of go down and visit with a little company called Oculus. And probably would have been able to just do our own venture fund out of the savings account if I had made that investment. Yeah, from fundraising. But that is the plight of VCs, especially VCs who are active and engaged, and you will absolutely miss deals. And like anything else, it's important to, and this is one of the things that it's important to do when you're fundraising. This is one of the things that's important for funds to do, is have a very sophisticated CRM and CRM process for tracking all of your activities so that you know and understand why and how you make decisions so that you can get smarter on a go-forward basis and understand and or see the signal now that you missed last time. Both directions, good signals and bad signals.
So how many of you already have a CRM in place? How many
That's
of you are going to go get one now? All right. Well, with that, I think we'll open it up for Q&A.
Yes, I would like to address one elephant in the room I noticed. When we were calling out the branches, I noticed. How many people do we have that served in the United States Marine Corps?
Marine Corps.
All right.
I just had to make sure because I didn't want any problems.
Now, none of you raised your hand when I said Navy, right?
Oh, and the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
There's one. Where
Treasury
are you?
Department. All right.
All right, now that we have that, we've gotten that out the way. Whew, it was a little heavy in here for a second. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, sir, Mr. David.
Yes, I have a question. For a startup, and let's say a startup that's like really at the very beginning, no sales, anything like that, what can you expect? What's the percentage that a venture capitalist wants of the company for the seed money? And if you want a solid number, let's just say $250,000 seed money. I mean, what sort of ranges should the entrepreneur expect in the negotiations?
So I'll say that every single deal is different. So there's a negotiation that occurs every single time. Most seed funds are 10 to 20% ownership from a targeting standpoint. At Moonshots for seed deals, we target 10 to 15% ownership. More if it's earlier, less if it's a little bit later. At the later levels and for larger funds, they're at a minimum 20% ownership and sometimes up to 35% ownership. And in later stage, I've seen funds that, because there's something called like a first check, and then there's dry powder that you put behind it to either protect, increase, and or help sustain that business. Larger funds I have seen own more than 50% of companies, which starts to do weird dynamics in venture because that becomes more of a private equity play. But you should expect to, at a minimum 10 to 20%, more if you have less development and or less sophisticated entrepreneur with a track record.
How much do the startups come and ask you
So seed is a moving target. Any descriptor is a moving target. There are kind of ranges of buckets of money that people ask for. Anyone asking for under $500,000, I question why they're out looking for money. One, they should raise it from friends and family because it's little, and there are a whole bunch of different kind of publicly available places to raise little smaller amounts of money. Yeah. And then seed has gone, we've seen $5 million seed rounds. So if you do the math on that, if you're giving away 10 to 20% for $5 million, you're a pretty significant company. So that either has to be a very experienced team that's done it before multiple times and you're lucky to get in their deal, or they've got a massive amount of traction and it's the first time they're out raising capital.
All right, any other questions? You are?
So as a VC, benefit corporations are becoming more and more popular. What is your take on a benefit corporation and investing in one yourself?
So I've made angel investments into B Corps, two of them now, and I don't have any problem with it. Every time you make a decision about making a statement for whatever your company is, whether it's your mission statement, your corporate structure, whatever it is, you need to evaluate kind of your bang for the buck. What are you trying to accomplish, and what is the likely outcome of making that decision? The more out of mainstream that you decide to do things, the more you narrow the aperture on the people that are likely to, your options for getting whatever it is you want, whether it's customers, whether it's employees, whether it's, in some instances, right? If you're doing it for a specific purpose and it aligns with the company's mission and the people that you want to bring in and the investors that you want to have, then go for it. But it's becoming more mainstream than it was 2-3 years ago.
Thank you.
So good morning, and thank you for coming in from California to be with us in this 23-degree weather. I'm Anthony, and I got a question. It deals with the question that was asked on the other end about startups. Recently finished an accelerator, and one of the things that they say in accelerator is you never want to go direct to VCs. You want to have a soft intro. Can you talk about how all of the veterans here who don't have that connection, business, corporate type, because we've been left, right, left for so long, will go get contacts or introductions to VCs? Because I know most of us, Marines, Army, Airmen, sailors, Coast Guardies, will go VFR direct without caring who the person is.
So the question is, how do you approach a VC to ask for money, or what's the most appropriate and or likely to be successful way to attack for money?
Or how do you get an intro to somebody?
So this coincides with the element that I think is most misunderstood by the general public, and that's the creativity of military veterans. And one of the reasons it's so hard to fight the U.S. military is because we're not told exactly how to do everything. Like, take the bridge. Okay, there's a whole lot of ways to do that, and you've got to solve for that. Coordinate, fields of fire with your next door neighbor. Like, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that, right? And I don't think that there's only one way to approach a venture capitalist or anybody that you're asking for anything. I do think that because, as I described, the volume that's inbound, it's like anything else, trying to find a job. A warm intro at least gets it's known that somebody looks at it closely, right? Meaning, if another VC who I've worked with previously or an entrepreneur that we've backed before sends a deal to Craig or I, we're going to review it to some degree, to a deeper degree, because that person is going to say, hey, what'd you think? Or at least it gets through that component. A straight on off the website can also work, right? It's just more a randomization. Like it's less likely, right? So the more touch points that you can bring to bear on any problem that you're trying to solve, the better. So if I hear from 3 different people over the course of the week or 2 weeks or a month about an entrepreneur, and it's not just a one shot. You can get multiple shots at trying to get in and understand, how do I crack the nut? How do I get in and make that happen? So I think it's not a one size fits all, but the more touch points that you can get on data to the firm that you're trying to get access to, the better.
Thank you. I do have time for one more question. I saw someone. There you are.
Thanks so much. Todd Scarborough, I am a Marine, Raw Devils. And to your point, Kelly, earlier you mentioned that none of us raised our hand when you said Navy. My father-in-law is a Navy submariner from Vietnam, and we have jokes going back and forth, as you can imagine, on Christmas. Last Christmas, I got him with this one. So it just so happens the Marine Corps is within the Department of the Navy. No offense to my brothers and sisters in the Navy, but we just happen to be the men's department. So, I'm involved with a number of startups in tech space, all veteran-owned and veteran-led. One is it's later stage. They've got revenue. They're about 4 years in, and they've got some decent revenue. And the other's looking for a seed. No revenue yet, pre-revenue, but a much bigger application, I believe, from a TAM standpoint. So the main questions are, number one, what do you think is the most exciting area for veterans to focus on in the tech space right now that Moonshot's also excited about? And the second piece is, Series A versus, and you talked a little bit about this earlier, but Series A versus seed. Is it necessary that a seed doesn't have revenue, or Series A vice versa? Just curious about that piece.
So sectors for military veterans to focus on, I can't say off the top of my head that there's a specific sector that military veterans should focus on. I know that Craig and I see a lot of deals that are cyber, logistics related, companies that can potentially sell into DoD for some reason. All of those, for all of the obvious reasons, seem to attract that background. But Craig and I are excited or happy to invest in companies that have military veterans at any part of the operating team for any sector, because they just make it better. In terms of what you have to have for revenue for the different levels, you can read in lots of places suggested revenue levels for where you need to be. But like I said, every deal is different. The more exigent you can make it seem or feel to the entrepreneur, to the investor, the more likely you are to get them moved. Because for most investors, a very safe place is kind of waiting a little bit longer to get more data to see what happens. And your job is to get them off the snide, right? And then I want to say one thing. So how many entrepreneurs in the room? All right. I highly encourage each of you that when you're ever in front of anybody who has the ability to write a check and you want money from anybody ever, if you're like looking for money, that when you're offered the opportunity to talk into a microphone in front of a room full of people that also includes somebody who can write a check, that you get the microphone and that you say your name and you say what your company does in an interesting way so the investor wants to talk with you after they're speaking or they're in front of, or any other investor that happens. How many investors in the room? Oh, you should be looking around real quick to see who they are, right? So
At least 5.
A master at this, and we learned doing this, a little guy that came in and he's in the back of the room with an orange hat on, Joseph Kopser. And he knows exactly what I'm talking about, but don't miss opportunities or chances. And I know at least 3 people talked, and I don't know what your businesses are or if you're entrepreneurs or if you need money or not, but you had an opportunity to do it. So don't squander opportunities to pitch your business. That's your passion. It's what you're going after, and you shouldn't apologize for it either.
And then I'll add to your question also for Bunker Labs, it's much the same. Our community is made up of solopreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, food truck owners, a variety of industries and services and products. But just get yourself plugged into an organization like Bunker Labs or an industry-based organization and get yourself networked and with the skills and the qualities that you possess, you'll find some success there. So.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Sabrina. I just want to conclude this keynote and bring Craig back up for a few last words.
Big round of applause. Like, I just want to say, do you see why you won The Apprentice, right? I mean, Kelly is awesome, and that was a great job. Sabrina, great job, Kelly. One last thing. Josh is quite selective with these. This is a fairly new Capital Factory coin that I whispered in his ear and said we should get coins. I'm not going to leave you hanging. Presented for excellence from the Capital Factory, the center of gravity for entrepreneurship in Texas. Boom, boom. Wait. Great job. Maria.
I'm sure you have one of these. There's bunker left.
Networking, networking, networking. You're going to hear about that all through today's event. So next up, we have Service, Startups, and Tech, a Veterans Military Transition, moderated by David Porter, DoD Account Executive, Army, Microsoft National Security. David has experience in cloud application development, cloud technologies, and Army programs. Prior to joining Microsoft, David was in the 75th Ranger Regiment for seven years, infantry branch. David Porter.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity on behalf of Microsoft. We're grateful to be here, grateful to be a partner of this, and really from taking off the Microsoft hat from an individual veteran perspective, I'm very happy to be able to be here and take part in this and in the veteran community. And belated, but happy Veterans Day to everybody. I know it's Veterans Month, so a big shout out to all you vets out there. So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to introduce Bo Oliver from Booz Allen Hamilton. Bo, if you want to come on up. I don't want to give too much of his story away because I'll let him speak for himself, but want to welcome Bo here and have a good discussion here. So I think to kick it off, we'll kind of just set the stage. I don't want to talk too much about myself, but as Bo and I have been talking the last couple of days, we realized we're both kind of A-type personalities, and if you left us up here, we'd probably turn to each other.
Very odd for military veterans.
Yeah,
that's
probably talk
weird.
for about straight 40 minutes and forget the crowd was there. So I'm glad that they're going to tell us it's time to stop and turn it to Q&A, because really, I think the value of these conversations are to get the questions and the input from you and try to drive some value from the experiences that we've had. So I think with that, Bo, if you want to kind of set the stage and kind of tell us where you came from your military career to how you got to where you are now.
Sure, yeah, we can dig into it more as we go as well, but I have a fairly unique background. I started off, I was a Naval Academy graduate. To Kelly, I would call it the Academy. And I noticed that he mentioned 2 Naval Academy grads in his 3 examples too. So after Navy, I went and I flew P-3s in the Navy for over 9 years. Made my transition out, went back to grad school, and then jokingly cut my teeth in entrepreneurialism at a 286,000 person company when I went to Deloitte. Which is kind of funny, but it almost ruins you for the rest of your life, right? You get used to moving fast and doing that piece. From there, I've gone and I've worked with different phases of startups and established companies over the years, typically post-VC acquisition, after they've put a little bit of money into it and aren't getting the ROI that they want out of it. I can come in and try to help do a little bit of a turnaround, get it back on track, evaluate their product portfolio, and pieces like that. I currently work at Booz Allen Hamilton, VP of Solutions. Working with a lot of you guys and a lot of our partners in the industry to bring the best products and solutions and capability sets to solve some of the cooler problem sets in the military. I also work on the side as well. Started a VC firm, run an accelerator, and am tied into the entrepreneur community pretty heavily through that as well.
So, Bo, let me ask you, so your journey from that transition from military to civilian, how did that affect you professionally, and what lessons do you think you carried with you through that transition into your current state?
Yeah, anybody who's done it, probably a lot of people in this room have done it as well. It's tough, right? You go from a world you understand very well with a lot of people that you are very much alike and doing a mission that you've trained incredibly for. I joke with people that I have a PhD in aviation after 9 years and I can't use it anymore, right? So it's very tough transition as you do that. You're also going into an area where you just don't understand, right? You've got a lot of leadership and other capabilities that people talk about. You'll hear a lot of people say things about the intangibles and different pieces like that, but what you're missing is that functional and industry expertise that a lot of your peers have gained over the years. And how do you find that way to transition and get up to speed very quickly? I think the biggest thing that I take, and again, I think we've already said it a couple times, but is network as much as possible. And I know it almost sounds, like, oh, obviously, yes, network. But I think in the military, we overlook it a lot because, one, you don't like to ask for help, right? I didn't ever want to ask for help. You don't like to say, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. Can you tell me what I'm talking about? Especially if it's a potential spot that can get you a job. But the biggest thing that I did that I took and tried to accelerate as much of my understanding as different industries as possible was I bought coffee for probably 150 different people. And one thing that I found with the veteran community is that they would not only embrace that opportunity to sit down and share their story. Again, I think it's a lot about how you go about it and how you approach people. Less about, picking somebody's brain, more about understanding their own journey and their path and how they got there and what you can learn from that. And then more importantly, were the second and third order effects of that network. Everybody that I had coffee with, made a connection with, would not only follow up with me to check on how I was doing, they would also make 3 to 4 other introductions and connections eventually that led to my first job, getting out of the military. And thankfully gave me a couple to choose from as well, and more so a good understanding of what I was getting into. Sure. Another piece that I see, everybody in the military has a lot of peers that are in the same boat. I see a lot of people doing what I call either kind of right turns or taking a step back to figure out what they want to do, right? Somebody goes into a leadership development program at one of the large Fortune 500s just to realize that they don't want to do that particular job, and now they almost take a step back or a lateral transition to something else. So the more that you can learn about the industries that you're getting into, both the industry and the functions.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. So I get this question a lot. They say, Dave, you jumped out of airplanes and kicked in doors. You're an infantry guy. Like, how did you get in tech, right? And the disconnect for a lot of people that don't see it. Now, I asked myself that question many times, but I'll kind of pose it to you. So, from flying an airplane or an aircraft to tech, help bridge that gap, because I think a lot of times people don't realize that the value and the lessons learned in the military transfer to the tech industry. So kind of unpack that for us a little bit.
Yeah, sure. First off, I joke with people that we're all in the tech industry. If you don't think you are, then you need to reevaluate what you're doing. And if not, you will be shortly. The 2 best pieces of advice I got from that networking were, 1, everybody's in tech. 2, everybody's in sales. And the better you can get experience in the 2 of those as part of your role, the better off you'll be. And that was kind of exemplified to me by, if I got on and I looked on job postings for where I wanted to be in 5 to 10 years and the type of job that I wanted, each one of those had several things in common. It had 2 to 4 years Big Four consulting experience, right, which is why I kind of chose to go that direction. The other piece is that it had sales experience and it had tech understanding. From my perspective, that was an area I didn't have a lot of, right? I mean, I could talk you the aerodynamics of a plane and, the technicals of an aircraft, the electrical systems, all that. But when it came to, a go-to-market for a piece of software or something like that, those are very foreign and things that you can't really get purely from books, right? So I kind of got tied into the entrepreneurial community, and the consulting side of it, I think, is where I gained a lot of value, because being, somebody at the time who's 30 years old, sitting in with a CEO who's been the CEO of a Fortune 500 for 30 years and looks at you like, why should I listen to you about what I should do, right? And my joke to them was always, well, how many strategies have you built in the last year, right? 1. I've done 120, right? So getting that expertise and being able to have it behind you to talk it is where I think it comes in. And what I found is a lot of those strategies involve products and solutions now. And it's hard to not have that. So you've got to kind of add that to your tool bag, and that's how I got into the tech space a little more.
Sure. Well, let's shift a little bit, and let me ask you, what has been your experience working with startups? I know both you and I work for fairly large companies. And so we're talking about entrepreneurs and startups. So what's been your experience in the startup/entrepreneur world in your course since you left the military?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece has been working hard to keep a foot in that world, right? I think being in larger corporations, it gets more difficult to be a part of that. And that's where I started working with, some startups on the sides and different pieces, and then eventually getting more into the investment side and working a little harder to help, I like the word Sherpa. We use that a lot, right? Mm-hmm. The Sherpas are the guys that have been up the mountain and down the other side and lived to tell about it, that can now take that expertise and give it back to these other companies. From that perspective, the startups, to me, it's a fantastic fit coming from the military, right? You get a lot of people that are passionate about their job and are working, 120 hours a week to make their dreams a reality. You don't get a lot of that as much in the big corporation piece, right? There are pockets and you do it, but to me, it's a personal thing too, to stay involved with people who are that connected to the mission and want to get things done.
Sure. So let me ask you this, and I know Kelly touched on it last. So, the military, from the private all the way up to the 4-star general, right, is constantly dealing with a barrage of problem solving, field crafting. I think every branch calls it something different. I think I understand why good leaders come out of the military and what kind of produces that. I'm interested in getting your take on that. I know we've kind of talked a little bit about it before, so what give us your 2 cents on that.
I don't think there's necessarily a single answer, but,
Sure.
but I can definitely tell you what from my perspective, has been the biggest. And to your point before going into that, I think it's just as difficult to transition for all those levels, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we joked, I've sat with 4-stars who are like, I have no idea what I'm doing when I get out of this. What do I didn't know what I made until last month when my wife told me. You get a lot of that stuff pushed out as you get up. The biggest piece from the military from me is, it almost sounds cliche when you talk about the leadership and pieces like that, but similar to sales, I argue the best way to train, people in sales is to throw them in the deep end and let them go do it, right? The best way you hone as an entrepreneur your elevator pitch is to do it 1,000 times, right? Not to read it, not to do it, but pick up that microphone, like Kelly said, and go practice it. I think it's the same thing on the sales side. The military uses that kind of mantra from leadership, right? You're tossed into it at a very young age. We were joking this morning, that was most apparent to me, 24-year-old guy that's told to pack up a P3 with 20 other people, fly it from Portland, Maine over to Qatar for 6 months, fly on my own and just call back in every day and tell people how it went, right? That's, and unless you're in that kind of community, even if you are, that's still pretty nerve-wracking, right? Nobody was there saying, hey, Bo, come here, let me show you how to plan a trip to Qatar. You've never been there, right? Hey, come here, let me introduce you to these 10 crews that have flown in the Middle East and the lessons learned, things like that, right? It's kind of that, find a way or make one mentality, and you go and you learn to get it done. And that's what I think is a real value that I see in both the veterans that I work with and myself, and then people that we hire.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even pile onto that. Last week, I was with a bunch of Rangers out of 175 Savannah, and I was looking at these guys where I once was, and I said, gosh, man, these guys are young. I don't even feel like I looked that young when I was their age. And I'm not old, but it made me proud though, because the level of stress and expectation is so high on our young leaders, right? So in my opinion, naturally the pool that comes from that lends itself well to industry agnostic, right? It creates good leaders. But so let me ask you, and I don't know how much time we have until Q&A. Okay. How can veteran entrepreneurs work with partners like Booz and I'll throw Microsoft and all, what has it been in your experience that the entrepreneurs out there can work and to integrate into some of the business that Booz has?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously value veterans a great deal. I tell people over 50% of our workforce in the Texas area is veteran connected, over 30% at large across the U.S. for Booz Allen. Military connected being either a former veteran or a spouse. We receive numerous awards and different pieces as we go through there. To me, it ties back to kind of what we hold dear and our differentiation, which is, those technical skills the consulting expertise, but more importantly, that deep understanding of the mission and what the military is doing. And that's where I like working with veteran entrepreneurs, is they share that same, not only understanding, but passion for that mission and the impact that that makes. And you know, we're one of the leading small veteran-owned businesses and partners in the U.S.
Sure, no, that's great. So let's turn it a little bit. So, what do you think have you seen as blockers or potential blockers that veterans coming out kind of stumble upon as they kind of move out? I know, you know, I think that hiring vets is great because I'm a vet and someone hired me, so naturally I feel that way. But you know, I know what my own blockers were, but what have you seen, maybe even your own experience, that prevent vets from really taking that leap forward?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's not unlike any other startup. I really push and I come back down to what I see the most often that prevents someone from being able to work with startups is the fact that you don't articulate your need statement well enough, the value prop that meets that need, and your differentiation. And it really comes down to those three key things. I tell people all the time, it's the idea of an aspirin versus a vitamin. Right? And the way I explain that is if I walked around this room and asked everybody, hey, do you think vitamins are important? Would you take vitamins? Would you pay money for vitamins? We'd get 100%. Yeah, they're super important, right? Well, would you pay $50 a month for vitamins? Well, probably not, right? Whereas, you know, the other side of the equation is, say, you know, like a cancer drug, right? You'll spend $10,000 a month for a cancer drug because that's solving a real-time need that you have. And really fleshing down into that, making the tweaks necessary and going through it. The other piece I always ask either potential investments or companies that we're going to partner with is to talk me through where you've made a big strategic shift in your business model. And the reason I do that is that it shows a level of maturity of that company and lets me understand where they are. Because those of you that have not made a big strategic shift yet, either one, tell me it's coming, or two, that maybe you're not tied into the market as well as you should be. And being able to talk through that, what you did, why, and how that worked out, to me is a bigger piece than any of the other typical KPIs that you would look at for a startup.
Absolutely. So we got time for one last question, so I'll make it easy. So what would current Bo tell Bo getting out of the military? What advice would you give him? Then we'll turn it over to Q&A.
I think my biggest advice would be to always kind of keep a little bit more of a future focus, right? It's very easy, especially at bigger corporations, to get down in the weeds and focus on your day-to-day. You know, you heard a lot of the urgent versus the important. Keep an eye on that important piece. It's very easy to solve the inconveniences that you hear from people and clients on a daily basis. It's much harder to get a good understanding of what keeps your future clients up at night and what they're really worried about. If you can tap into that, you're way ahead of where everybody else is, right? It's the old Gretzky quote, go to where the puck's gonna be, not to where the puck is.
Exactly. I think with that, we can turn it over to some Q&A.
Yes, question time. All right, I'll start over here. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Greg Rogers. I'm the CEO of a company called Ashlar. It's a new startup. Has a protective, innovative material that can go into any helmet design, actually offer protection against impact forces. My question is, we think it's also an industry in and of itself because it's a material that can be used in blast walls. It can be used in the inside of unarmored vehicles to protect against the hits that come from outside and protect the stuff that's inside. But the question is it more important from an entrepreneur standpoint or from an investor standpoint that we stay focused on, we can work on helmets, or does it sound better to talk about it broadly in the industry terms?
Yeah, and you know, I may be a little different than most from that opinion, and this is one. I joke with people, advice from investors is like advice on a resume. You can get stuck chasing your tail if you don't kind of take the good and keep applying it, right? And the reason I say it's like a resume is I've never seen a perfect resume where somebody doesn't give you some input on it, right, and how to make it better. You'll always get that from investors as well. The biggest advice I can give is know your investors. A little bit beforehand, look at the deals they've invested in previously is the best way to get to know them and see what they value. Me personally, I want to see your roadmap for how you're going to go change the world with something, right? Maybe that starts with helmets, but I want to see that you're thinking about applications across different industries. Commercial airliners, everything. Just show me that you're expanding that potential market after you prove it and that you have a path to get there. And that's what I view as really sexy when I'm looking at something from that perspective.
All right, so I saw a question over here.
George Kernett, Mobile Labs. I was 3rd 75th, 86, 87, First Ranger Company. One of the questions I have is a little embarrassing, but since we're veterans, some of us, like I have TBIs, anxiety dissociation thing and stuff like that. How does that work, like trying to work with sensitive issues and so forth? Like I want to work with the Army labs over here, and I'm trying to figure out how to approach them, like trying to get a CAT card and stuff. When like I go to the vet center tomorrow, see a counselor and stuff like that. How do we work around stuff like that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I think that first off, you have drive and you know what you want to do. So that's good, right? So you have a direction. And then it sounds like you're taking advantage of some of the things that are out there for veterans who've been there and done that. So, I guess there's not one way to do what you're asking. I think there's probably a lot of different ways to skin that cat, right? So I'm kind of a shotgun approach to what I want. If usually I narrow in, and if it doesn't work, I find another way, right? So I think, it's... it's been said before, your network is going to work for you. So you get out there and meet people, the people who are sitting to your left and right now, have solutions to your exact problem or a way to help you out. Get out there and talk to people like Bo and myself and people in this room, because I may give you something that may not work, but somebody sitting next to you may give you an idea or have a connection to somebody that will work. So, as generic as it is, continue to network. Don't stop networking, because there are people out there who have answers for you. I wish I could give you something specific, but truly I do believe that vets want to help vets. People who are in the defense business want to help veterans out. And you can go and find every company out there who's doing it. Reach out to those people. Because they will help you, and they'll help you try to find a path to get to where you want to go. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Bo.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on, David. And I think, ultimately it takes a village, right? And you've got that village already, more so than most. And how do you take advantage of that?
I feel fortunate being in Austin. I just came from Hawaii. It's a long story, but the resources here, there's a lot, and I'm going to pursue it. I have issues, so anyway, Rangers lead the way.
Yeah, Rangers lead the way.
Need to bring some of that Hawaii weather with you.
Yeah, no flip-flops today.
Thank you so much for your transparency.
Hi, my name is John Dady. I'm the CEO of a company called Untitled. You can think about us as a Slack, but with a specialty in healthcare, and specifically for the pre-hospital market, EMS and firefighters. So, we are doing a raise right now, $500,000 seed round, shameless plug. My big challenge is I'm a non-technical founder. So I've been able to bring a product to market, and we've got a decent amount of traction. But how would you go about finding somebody to be either a technical co-founder? And in lieu of that, what would you do to make sure that you're solidifying your development process, so as you're adding customers and growing at a very quick pace, that you don't fall down? Make sense?
No, absolutely. And that's a pretty kind of common problem that you see a lot too, right? Founders and ideas, from what I've seen, typically take like one of two paths. You've either got, the very technical approach that has built something that solves a need, that struggles and spends a lot of their time to understand the business aspect of it, or you've got somebody with the business aspect of it that struggles to find that really good, trusted technical partner to do it, right? There's 8 million people out there that offer up their time and their piece. So how do you find the right one and what that is? The big advice I give is keep working on filling those gaps and put on kind of your investor hat from that. And if you don't necessarily have an investor hat or the experience in it, sit with somebody and ask through it. The big pieces are, I constantly tell startups, figure out where you've got those gaps and how do you fill them. Is it a person? Is it an advisor? Is it, a co-founder? Is it another partner? How do you get to that and how do you fill it is really how I kind of go about that.
Okay, good.
And figure out some ways that you're going to evaluate those talent when you get it, right? I mean, bringing on a co-founder is the riskiest thing you can do.
Exactly. Thank you. Thanks.
So I only have time for 2 more questions, which I've identified over here. Make sure you use the networking time and happy hour since we can't get to all the questions at this time.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Jaeger. I own Tattoo One Source. It's an online directory for the worldwide tattoo community. I'm a Air Force Special Tactics veteran and Army Civil Affairs. The question that I have is, what advice do you have for veterans that are entering the entrepreneurial space in an area that is completely outside of their comfort zone? A lot of people go into contracting and defense-related stuff. I'm in an area that veterans are definitely interested in, the tattoo space. But what advice would you have for people that are focusing away from the military background?
Yeah, but personally, what I look for is, you've got to focus on those intangibles that we talked about and why you're able to apply that in a different space. And then you better show me very quickly that you can get up to speed and become an expert in that space as well, which, experience is the best teacher. So I'm sure you've gained a lot of that over the last few years as you do this. And then I think it goes back to what we were talking about over here, is filling those gaps, right? Bring that group around you that makes you successful and that has that expertise that you need. And you see a lot of companies are hesitant to do that, it seems, whether they don't have those connections or they feel that they're going to become experts on it and go it that way. You're going to exhaust yourself trying to become an expert in everything from fundraising to product launch to a specific industry, right? You just can't do it as one person or even as a team. So how do you fill those strategic gaps that investors are going to ask questions about and do so in a way that shows you and without giving up a lot of your company to do it, right?
Last question. You don't get to ask the next round. This is your last time.
All right, so good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony. How many veterans are in here today? Have any of you ever PCS or did a TAD travel longer than 5 days? Yes? And you were subject to staying in a hotel, correct? Well, so what I'm doing, my company is called At Ease, which is the Airbnb for military and federal employees whenever they do official travel. Current JTR regulations prohibit the use of sites like Airbnb and HomeAway whenever you use official travel lodging. So what I'm doing is curating a list of short-term rentals that are within regulations for lodging that pertains to federal industries. So my question for you is, I want Microsoft to be one of my partners as I go forward because I know they just won $10 billion and I want that help. How does an entrepreneur
David
company...
was writing checks this morning.
Like, I was giving money out this morning. You missed it. There was a line.
I'm coming to the next line. But realistically, my question is, like, for a startup who's looking at serving the industry like the government, Microsoft being more of the private sector, but now moving into the government sector, other than all the computers we have on base, what would you say for both companies, Deloitte and Microsoft? What are some of the paths and processes which small businesses should take to get those partnerships and those core sponsorships from large corporations like the both of yours?
So I'll just say for the record, the JEDI contract is still under protest. So we have talk to me next week after Friday, and then I'll give you a definitive answer on that. But I would just say, do what you do and do it really well. And I think that it's good to have stretch goals if you know what you want and industries and companies that you want to align with. But don't lose sight of doing the best job at what you're after. I mean, I like the idea. When I was in it, I would go TDY. We tried to buy a condo because we were going to be somewhere for so long for 10 of us, and it just didn't work. So I totally get what your business is doing, and I think it's great. So do that and try to do it the best you can. And naturally, what's going to emerge are relationships with people like Booz and Microsoft and all of those. It's good to have those goals, but it's good not to lose sight of exactly what you're trying to do and be the best at.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, first and foremost, I would want to know your business case, and I believe we actually get to talk later today for Epic Office Hours. So, have that business case for yourself and how you're going to make it successful without, and then show a value prop for both yourself and the partner that you're going to do that. Either the two of you combined and are able to offer a better, say, mission support or end-user experience. And, at the end of the day, there's a lot of, what's in it for your partner too. Right, especially the big companies, it's similar to a VC firm. You've got to really articulate your value proposition because these companies, similar to Booz, are involved with hundreds and thousands of startups. on a daily basis. So having that ability where you've thought through how that combination adds more value to the end user and to each other is the most important piece.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Bo and David. Give them a round of applause, please.
Careful.
Whew, all right, we have some good content happening today. With that being said, we've sat through 2 panels, and I know sometimes we can get anxious. Don't leave the room. This is always the tricky part when you give everyone a minute and then the audience tries to disperse. So I just want you all to stand up for a second. If you feel like it, if you don't want to, that's fine. Just stretch your legs out a little bit. Also, shameless plug, thank you, Danielle, for my wonderful CBD energy drink. Woo! See, that's why I have all this energy today. Thank you, Danielle. Make sure you try out Joy Organics today. They'll be here in the right, and they'll be here all day. So we're going to get started at about 2:25 on the next panel. We're going to get the room set up for that. Grab some water, grab some, I think there's a couple coffees left here, but make sure you're back in your seats by 2:25. You won't want to miss the next discussion. Thank you.
Marcus, Carey, if you're here, can you please come back to the green room?
All right, if we can go ahead and start getting seated. There'll be plenty of time to network. Make sure you attend our happy hour. That's a great time to connect with some of the peers in the room. I know, I'm sorry, guys. I know I said there was coffee. It was packed up quickly, and what was left, left. So, hey, don't shoot the messenger, but it's all gone. I'm sorry. All right, so it looks like everyone is seated where they want to be seated at this time, and that's fine. We want you to feel comfortable in this space right now. So we got about 2 more minutes till we get started. Or you want to go ahead and get started? All right, so it's so quiet, we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Next up, we have social impact in service and in tech. Jenny Dufresne is the CEO of the Dufresne Solutions Group, a leadership training firm. The firm supports CEOs and mid-level managers to build great teams, reduce employee turnover, and create a thriving company culture. Jenny served 10 years in the United States Marine Corps. Jenny holds degrees from Harvard University and George Mason University. Jenny.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, thank you. If you are standing up and you're ready to come have a seat, please fill in up front. That's always a wonderful thing to have people up front. It gives good energy. As we said, my name is Jenny Dufresne. I'm super excited to be here. Served a long, long time ago in the dark ages of the Marine Corps is what I say. When a lot of things that you may take for granted today were not part of the common way of being. But I'm really excited to sit here with this distinguished panel of folks, and we're going to do a little bit of maybe things a little bit differently. So our topic is social impact. So we had a call and we're all like, what is social impact? So we're going to kind of break it down to kick off. But what I'd love to do is Nathan, Cassandra, Andrew, and Marcus, we all served, and Cassandra is still in uniform, still serving, and who's reserves? And Andrew's still in the reserves. So we all had a mission. So the way I'd like to kick this off is you share your name, where you are currently, just a snippet, and then what your mission was in your respective branch of service. So that's what I like to serve on. What were you doing in your respective branch of service to kick us off today?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Taha. I'm an abuse fighter at Google, and I was in the Marine Corps Reserve at a field artillery unit, but I went to Iraq as a truck driver for infantry.
Okay, excellent.
There you go. Cass McGinnis. I am an active duty Army engineer. I'm stationed here as a deputy of operations here at Army Applications Lab. What I did previously, if you know anything about the engineers, I did everything. So I was a topographic analyst for about 6 years, and I was a horizontal and a vertical construction engineer for about 12 to 13 years, and then I was a combat engineer out of 1st Armored Division, Fort Bliss, Texas. Oh, before I pass it, I am married to a retired gunnery sergeant, so happy belated birthday, Marine Corps. There you go.
How's it going, everybody? My name's Andrew Maudsley. I'm a Marine Reservist. I did 8 years active in aviation logistics and intelligence work. 8-year point, decided to leave active duty, went to business school, worked for Dell for 3 to 4 years, and for about 8 months I've been working for Verbo, company you all might know better as HomeAway. It's all the same company, owned by Expedia Group. And but I, wanted to maintain connection with the Marine Corps and DoD, and so I'm a Marine Reservist with Defense Innovation Unit, which has a small office here at the Capitol Factory. Our main office is out of Silicon Valley, but it's a great way to kind of stay connected with the mission.
Marcus Carey. I was 8.5 years in the U.S. Navy. I did cryptography. Cryptographic communications, where I protected our country's data, did all kind of crazy stuff all over the world. So now I've been an entrepreneur. I've been part of Bunker Labs. I started a company 6 years ago, and last month, I believe, we announced that we got acquired a company called ReliaQuest out of Tampa, Florida. So I had an opportunity to build a company and sell it, and now I'm here to talk about social impact.
Awesome, great. So social impact. You guys might be sitting here wondering, well, what is social impact? Really simply, it's just the mission, right? So all of us, everyone in here is a veteran, current or active. Please raise your hands. Is everyone else a civilian then? Just so I make sure. Sorry, veterans, raise your hands. Okay, great. Are there any civilians in the room? Okay, great. Thank you. So for us, social impact is really just having a mission. And so when we're talking about having a mission in service, and then this idea of having social impact or mission in the tech sector, there's often a huge gap. And I think that we've all kind of talked about it when we've spoken in the past. We kind of talked about what that gap can be. So I want to kick us off today for the folks who've left service and have come and started companies or currently working with tech companies. What would you say, and anyone can jump in, what would you say were some of the ways that you had to kind of, the actions that you had to take or to kind of define what you were looking for in a mission-focused company? So what were some of the, maybe you were reading, maybe you were having conversations. There was a great conversation about mentoring earlier. What were some of the actions that you took to either define or redefine? What am I looking for in a mission-focused, mission-driven company?
People looking at me, so I'll answer
There you go,
this
Marcus.
first. So in building a company, I always wanted the company to have a positive impact on the community, and that was kind of like one of the things that I wanted to be. A really good book on business that I really like is From Good to Great, and what that book talks about a lot is it talks about what is the mission of the organization and how does everybody come together and help that mission. And so, and if you can do that, you can be a great company, is what the book talks about. And so, I kind of view everything as from a military mindset. I'm still brainwashed after all these years. So I want to have my team on the same mission, and my mission has always been, and I tell my teammates, anybody who work with me, I want to be a blessing to everybody I come across. And that's the mission. That was the mission of my company. And I know that mission, one of the reasons why we got bought is because they love that mission. The company that acquired my company believed in serving people and serving everywhere. So my transition from the military, in the military you serve the company, the country, the Constitution, and I have that same kind of feeling about serving my community on the outside of the military too. So that's how I built it inside of my organization.
Excellent, thank you.
So I'll share my experience, maybe not as idealistic, but it's just kind of being honest. But I did 8 years in active operating forces and had 3 little kids, and was just kind of like, my wife and I had lived 10 places in 10 years, and we said, you know what, we really just need to kind of prioritize the family and not be moving around all the time. So business school was kind of a place to transition and figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my career. Knowing that I wanted to support my family and just needed to take care of them. And so, when we were figuring out where to land, looked at the map and decided that, there are 2 places we wanted to end up, either Austin or Denver. And Austin had better weather, closer to family, more jobs in the tech industry. And so it just kind of seemed like that's a place to try and plant a flag for the family going forward. And so, when you leave active duty, there's kind of this feeling like never again will you have as much connection with a mission or a purpose or a higher calling. And obviously, there are many exceptions to that, but that's kind of what I felt like I was, in a way, giving up for the sake of my family. So anyway, transitioned, and Dell is by far one of the biggest employers in the Austin area, and incredible place to start a career in the tech industry, given the size of the company and many things that you can do there. But quickly you kind of recognize that, hey, just like in the Marines or any other service, you're dealing with people, and you're leading and managing people, and you can do that in any environment. And so I think, that's one element of purpose. And a second is you look at how many ways in which technology is revolutionizing our world for the better. And I think it's really easy to kind of see that and get connected with that mission, especially in a company like Dell that supports technology in so many different areas. And so, like kind of going forward, you think about, what does your career look like? You don't have to nail it on the first job that you might get out of the service, but you need to set yourself up and have the experience to be able to, let's say, on that second, third, or thereafter job to ultimately that's kind of what we all, I think, are solving for, is a way that we can, if you have a family, support them, but then also have a higher calling, have a mission that you're connected with. And so, 7 months ago, I had a great opportunity to join the team at Vrbo, vacation rental by owner, and it's awesome because it's like a much smaller company than Dell. Love the culture, and but I know from my experiences in the Marines, like all the travel that I did, when I got exposed to different cultures and people, like it really just gave me a greater appreciation. So I think of that very much as a kind of a social mission to help people around the world bring each other closer together and bring the world within reach, is what we say. So anyway, that's just kind of my advice and experience.
Excellent.
So I'm not certain. I'm still serving. Is it still? I don't know. I apologize. So I'm still serving. I'm not an entrepreneur yet. But for Army Applications Lab, who are we looking for? It starts with our vision. Our vision is to enable soldiers to dominate the battlefield. So we're looking to tech startups and small businesses to leverage commercial technology for these Army problems that we have identified that we need help with. So that's who we're looking to.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say I've been very lucky to kind of stumble into companies based on like people that I know or get recommended. So my first job out of undergrad was at National Instruments, and they have a very strong mission focus. They, the book before Good to Great was Built to Last. They're very much about that, and I could really identify with the mission of making tools that then scientists and engineers use to make the world a better place. So that allowed me to sleep well at night. I also got my MBA, and then I was in financial services for a couple years. That felt a little bit farther away. Now, I mean, the global banking system is important, but that was not that exciting to me. And then based on networking, an alum from the bank told me about this part of Google called trust and safety. So I got interested, was able to jump through all those hurdles and land a role in trust and safety. And this, to be able to have adversaries that are abusing things on the internet, that I get to fight them online, that's super exciting for me. And yeah, it took me many years and many different roles to kind of stumble onto that. So that's the type of mission that gets me super excited, where even if I was a billionaire, I would still want to fight abuse online. So that's my
fantastic.
criteria. Yeah.
Thank you. And so I hope for all of you in the audience that you can kind of start to connect to the fact that it doesn't have to look perfect. And the first time you step out isn't going to be it's definitely a process when you leave, and I'm glad for everyone to share. Cassandra, I wanted to touch into something that you said, and I think there's folks in the room that are either currently have your own companies. Is that accurate? Can you just raise your hand so we can get have your own companies? Are thinking about running a company, starting a company? Anyone in the room? Okay, great. So you had shared something earlier with the work that you do, and really the need to find veterans who can solve the problems that you all are trying to solve. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And then for the panel at large, if you all could talk about what's one thing that veterans can do to position themselves to be more accessible or a greater asset to companies that they're looking at or thinking about. But I want to get to yours and then for the rest of the panel.
Yes, so I've been a part of the team for about 4 or 5 months now. We're relatively a new organization. We're still less than a year old. What I have seen since I've been on the team is, all of these ideas that are coming in, I don't see a veteran proposing those ideas. I haven't seen that. And that's very important to me, because who better than someone who's been there, done that, to propose a solution? So it's very important, and we're actually grateful to be a part of this Veterans Summit because we are looking to veterans to solve the problems.
Excellent. So that was a plug for anyone that might have missed it. So for everyone else, what's one thing that veterans can think about as they're building their businesses or thinking about maybe stepping into the entrepreneur game? What's one thing that they can be thinking about to make themselves an asset to the companies that are looking for great talent? Anyone? Andrew, why don't you kick it off?
Sure. So I guess maybe combining that question with the previous one, I'd share an experience that I had in my reserve role with Defense Innovation Unit. And beginning of this year, and maybe some of you are familiar with the mission, maybe very similar to Army Applications Lab, but there's existing technology in the market that the DoD just does not have in the hands of the warfighter because of our outdated acquisition cycle, and it's like ultimately a national security risk that we don't have a way to quickly get this technology into the hands of Marines, sailors, soldiers. And so, organizations like Army Applications Lab and Defense Innovation Unit were created to kind of overcome that barrier. And beginning of the year, there was a Marine Corps client from Marine Corps Systems Command who had this need for a 3D concrete printer, like a 3D printer that could print concrete shelters or homes, right? And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had tried this and didn't really have great technology, and there were a few companies in the market, startups, that had been really successful in developing the technology. And so, the Marine Corps came to Defense Innovation Unit. I'm kind of this part of the small Marine Corps team there. And our job is to quickly identify what are the commercial companies that have a technology that could meet this requirement. Huge applications to any kind of a forward-deployed environment to be able to just press a button and in 24 hours you have a concrete home or shelter of some sort. So I'm the one guy in Austin here on the Marine team, and so it turns out, like, we put out the bid for the contract and 10 companies submitted. The leading company is a company called Icon, based in the Austin area here, and some of you all might know them. And so, like, kind of my job in this kind of unique role where I have a lot of exposure to the tech community as well as the defense community is to kind of serve as a technology scout and a business viability scout, to kind of go and look at startups and emerging technologies and see, like, okay, would this be potentially a good fit for our DoD client? So I went to this company, Icon, and kind of toured their lab and saw their technology and quizzed these guys. And I think one thing that really set them apart was it's a 20-person startup, but of those 20 people, they had two former Marines, or they had two Marines that had served, and immediately kind of connected with the mission of how this is going to be applied. And kind of to your point, like, they got it. And so I think that was a huge differentiating factor that allowed them to win the contract several months ago. And now we're kind of in prototype development to deploy this at Camp Pendleton early next year. But their director of operations is a Marine, and he's kind of the one in charge of really deployment of all their different projects. And so one of the cool projects that they exposed me to was an effort in Mexico to print 100 different homes in a really impoverished area that is suffering from a housing crisis. And you kind of, in talking with this guy, the director of operations, with his kind of experience in the Marines, it's so clear how tremendous that experience was in benefiting him in his role. In a small company, if you think about, in this instance, kind of almost like a deployed environment, really having to use those skills of adaptability and overcoming uncertainty. And I think, I don't know how you describe that, but I think that's one thing that veterans really have, is that ability to adapt and overcome and really figure things out, even when there seems to be no solution. And if I look at my civilian experience working in a company, if you haven't had that experience in a harsh environment, maybe you'll just kind of give up or step back. Whereas I think veterans, the opposite, you step in and you figure things out. And I think that's one thing that really can separate veterans in a startup environment or even a large corporate environment, is that willingness to get it done. I don't know if I don't know if this is a Marine thing or a military thing, but when I was first brought in the military, I was shared the Message to Garcia story, and it's a simple concept, but you'll find a way to figure it out, get the mission done.
Excellent. Just a caveat, I would say what's very important for veterans is to just stay plugged in. If I could, I kind of asked some folks that were walking around who has heard about Army Applications Lab, and no one raised their hand. So it's just staying plugged in. Once you serve your country and you go about your business, it's still very important for you to stay plugged in what's going on throughout the forces, because here we are, Army Applications Lab. We really need you. We really need you. So, thank you.
Okay, I'll go. I would say fall in love with the problem, right? Don't just pursue problems that you think might be that people want to invest in. Pursue the problems that truly interest you, that you get fired up about. Because if you're just doing something for money, that will just shine through really obviously. Because I was also previously I was an innovation scout, and that's whenever a startup would pitch me, I'd be like, hold on, I don't really care about your founding team's background. I want to hear a 1 or 2 sentence description of your problem. And I would say that is key to have. And if you can also have we're the X of Y, that also can cut through a lot of noise. And it hopefully shows that you've thought about the problem space a lot.
That's excellent. So one of the things that I think that the military people are really good at, that people kind of take for granted, is the ability to work as a team. Because investors invest in teams, typically, and not just one person. And we know how to play our position. If you're doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I don't think civilians are kind of used to that as much, to be honest with you. Also, the military, as a military person, you're willing to do whatever it takes. The last 5 years, every weekend, my wife and I will go in and clean our office, the toilets, the whole nine. Something I got very good at in the Navy. But as a Navy person, being in the military, you do what you got to do. Also, another thing, to stay plugged in, you're part of this huge fraternity, being a military service member, and also people love to help veterans. That's definitely been two truthful things. So 6 years ago, I met Craig Cummings and Joseph Kopser through Bunker, Jonathan and Sabrina, and that whole thing. And I went to pretty much every bunker event there was, definitely locally. I mentored people that were trying to pitch, participating in that thing. Little did I know that Craig Cummings will end up starting a fund, and he funded me. That's a military connection, right? And so there's probably people in here that even invested in from an LP perspective. And so that whole stay plugged in, you are a part of something real. And this is almost like being in a, I didn't go to college out of high school. This is almost like a fraternity that you're going to be a part of the rest of your life. And so stay close to veterans, help other vets out, because this family is a real thing. So stay plugged in.
Excellent. Those are excellent points. So we have about 3 minutes left. And I imagine that folks who are thinking about jumping into entrepreneurship or thinking about transitioning into a tech career have some reservations, have some fears, have some concerns. And so if each of you, and where you find that for yourself as well, could just share what was an internal challenge or barrier that you had to navigate through in order to either move into a new career or if you moved careers several times, or to start your own business. So just so, again, we can kind of shine the light on what really goes on internally as we're making these moves.
I'll go first.
Absolutely.
I really don't like it when people describe themselves as non-technical, because I think anybody can be technical if you have that intellectual curiosity and if you have that burning problem to solve. Yeah, you do whatever it takes. You learn what you need to learn to figure out how to solve it. So that's what I would say. I would not say don't let the word tech kind of discourage you.
One of the challenges that I've had with this job is become more civilian-minded, if you understand what I mean by that, which is one reason why we don't wear the uniform, so we can be more familiar with the community we're trying to work with. Tech startups, we see a lot of folks in here, and they'll come in their baggy sweatpants and their T-shirts, and we're trying to relate to that. And, yeah, and they're vegans. So I'm just kidding. So just trying to relate to the community that we need that help from has been a challenge, but I'm all for a challenge. And
awesome. So great. Andrew?
Yeah, so I think if there was a hang up or something that kind of insecurity in my transition, I'd say the biggest thing was massive amounts of student debt. I recognized that kind of forced me to the point where I had to take kind of a really secure job with responsibilities of family. But if I didn't have any debt and if I could be more risk tolerant, I absolutely would have joined a smaller company. I think it'd be more fun, more engaging, more opportunity in many ways. So I'm getting there, right? So I was at Dell, now I'm at Verbo, and hopefully in a few years I can jump on startup opportunity. But if you can kind of have your own house in order or finances secure, I think that really can make you a little bit more willing and able to take some risk in a smaller company.
So I want to make sure I understand the question real quick.
So just the internal, so as you transition, because I saw your LinkedIn article, so as you transitioned from being in uniform to being a business owner.
Yeah, so this is, I don't know who needs this, but I think somebody probably needs to hear this. When I was in the military, you were discouraged from getting out the military. If people tell you, oh, there's no jobs out there, the stock market might crash tomorrow, blah, 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 all this scary talk. So I would say that you, by being in the military, you're one of the top 1% of the whole country, anybody out there. So I want to encourage you that you're already a winner by being in the military. You raised up your hand and you're doing it. So you have more of what it takes than the rest of all these other people. And I know I'm crazy. I'm for real. You stood up. You're doing what you do. Have confidence in yourself that you can do it. If there's anything that's been wrong with me, is I've lacked confidence sometimes. I didn't think I was in the right place. I didn't think I could be the CEO. But when I got people like my man right there, Craig, they encouraged me and said, Marcus, look, you're a badass. You can do this. So let me tell you right now, you can do it.
Yep.
Alleviate all doubts.
Absolutely.
You're a badass, and you're going to win. So get used to winning.
Awesome. Great. That's awesome. So, you didn't. Sorry.
Going to go ahead and open the floor up for some questions. Oh, lots of hands. So I'm going to start over here since I'm already on this side. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. My name is Jason. I'm the founder of Conclude.com, the social platform for people who like to argue. And I'm going to start out with a little challenging because we've just finished our MVP. I did a cheap Twitter buy, and I pushed some of the social aspects. And my question is, when you've pushed social impacts of your businesses, have you faced some pushback of your own, and how did you deal with it? And I'll give you a second to think on that. What we pushed was that the site was very unbiased and anyone could say anything. We had some troll control. And I had people on the left saying, well, you're just a platform for extremists. And then my other social impact was to raise the level of discourse on the internet and in the comments section. And then I get people pushing back and saying, well, you're just trying to control everything, and you're the man. And Mr. Carey, I could see you getting that pushback coming from the cybersecurity. We're protecting you. No, you're protecting the man. So again, my question is, did you get any pushback when you tried to do what you thought was a good social impact?
No, I think that I think pushback is good. It's always good to learn a lesson from people. And believe it or not, some of the best feedback that you may get with a business is people that hate you. So you might want to listen, because they are 100% going to point out all the flaws in whatever you're doing. Your friends, they might not tell you all the truth sometimes, because they don't want to hurt your feelings. I love arguing. I would love to check out your platform. But I would say, like, the big thing, what helped me out is my domain expertise. You know, me working at NSA back in the day, everybody think that's like, wow, this guy worked at NSA. So they believe it, right? And so I think that the challenge is proving to people that you know what you're talking about and that you're a domain expertise, maybe in a social media space, maybe it's engineering space, cement, like he was talking about, that those people were domain experts. So that's what people pay for. So always make sure that almost what you're selling two things. You're selling the platform and you're selling your ability as an entrepreneur to execute. And that's what people invest in. So are you do you have domain expertise in being an entrepreneur? And do you have domain expertise in the social media space? And that'll prove to everybody. But yeah, definitely listen to people say don't listen to the comments. I mean, yeah, look at the comments. Look at the comments. Don't take it personal. That's going to bring out the best in you.
Okay, we have another question.
I just want to say for the Army, we get pushed back, and there's some reserve with tech startups wanting to work with the Army, wanting to work with DoD, period. You know, why do you want to work with us? One, because of the vision, you know, enabling soldiers to dominate the battlefield. We look at our technology, we know we need help. You know, we've been working with old stuff for a really long time, and we're still doing that. You know, it's another opportunity to generate another revenue, source of revenue, and dual use. We're all about dual use. If you've already employed something in the commercial world, you know, in the commercial sector, and you just tweak it just a little bit, you know, where, you know, it can be militarized, that's perfect. That's great. That's really what we want and really what we need.
Yes, I'm Greg Rogers again. I'm with Ashlar. We do the protective helmets in terms of inserts that work against impact forces and blast forces. But the reason why I wanted to ask a question was I'm a civilian, and I didn't share the experiences that you all did, which have made you a family that is very unique and very different than any of the family that's out here that were civilians. And I guess I ask the question as a CEO and say, how do I make myself more a part of your family? And then how can you help me to make you more a part of my family as we try to bring everyone together and think about how do we make businesses work in such a way that everyone is helped as a community? So how do we make it one community?
It's a fantastic question. And I think one of the things that we talk a lot about in different spaces is the fact that, and it was actually one of my questions, but I didn't ask it, is how do companies make themselves veteran ready? Because it does require a level of conscious effort. I'm in the leadership training space, and we see these kinds of challenges all the time. Either people are afraid of veterans because we've gone off to war and we've done what we've done and we've come back, or they just don't know, the veterans don't know how to translate all the things that we've done, you know, and we're 23, and we can, you know, outlead probably most people in a company. So I think it's a really awesome question, and I don't know if anyone has anything else that they've seen that'd be helpful.
I do. I'm going to plug any chance that I get. So I will just say that, so, you know, we're how do I put this? We're an innovation organization within the Department of Defense, right? But we're all green suiters. So in order to reach out to those tech startups and to reach out to those small businesses, to those entrepreneurs, we need to speak that talk. And you know, we're kind of brainwashed when it comes to the military. We know a lot of acronyms, we know a lot of jargon, but we need help with that, you know, reaching out to that population that speaks a language that we're not very used to.
And one brief thing I would add is, you know, look at where we are right now at the Capitol Factory on the 8th floor. There's so many, you know, defense-related activities, events. You know, Central Texas or Texas at large is such a veteran, military-friendly state and area, and whether it be the Texas Veterans Commission or many other nonprofits or organizations, if you're looking for ways to plug into the veteran community to really understand that experience, I think there's just so many ways to do that through events just like this. So.
Yeah, and one of my favorite annual volunteer events that I volunteer for is helping veterans or active duty military personnel update their resumes and make them civilian friendly. So that could be a very skill-based, actionable volunteering thing that you could do where you get to learn and you get to help them out kind of from the civilian side.
That's great.
Yeah, so one of the things that I tell people about, I talk about intersectionality a lot. Like, how are you hanging around people that you normally don't hang out with? Whether it be black, white. And an easy test for that is to break out your cell phone, look at the last 10 people you communicated with, and see what those people look like. And I challenge anybody to do that, and you'll see, well, maybe I don't have as, maybe my one black friend, I haven't talked to them since, 2 years ago, something like that. But I would say, how you help out with that though is like, you collaborate and you build with people when you don't have anything to gain from it. It's all cool us being here, and maybe DOX can give me a contract or something like that. But it's more important that you don't expect any expectations. I'm gonna help out military people because they're awesome. I'm gonna help out my civilian brother over here because he's awesome. I'm gonna do whatever, like take away all of the frills and just help your brother or sister out. And so that's how I do it. So help out veterans by being around veterans, and you got to be super intentional. And also, when you're hiring people, it's actually kind of hard to find a veteran and be intentional about it. It's hard when I'm a black founder. I want to find black engineers. No black engineers want to work for me, right? So it's so complicated. But no matter what happens, you have to be super intentional. You just gotta go do it. It's hard work. And that's my own personal experience. It was hard hiring veterans. It was hard hiring minorities. It was hard hiring women. But you just got to do it. You just got to make it happen. Yeah.
And want to be a part of it. But I kind of feel intimidated a little bit because I'm not a veteran.
We love everybody. Yeah. So
when we see each other as people,
100%.
then we can go at it.
Yeah. We went to war and fought and all that stuff for everybody, for all Americans. So I love you. You're a taxpayer. You pay your taxes. Everybody in here, it's nothing but love. You feel me? So I would say just be super intentional. Just try to network with veterans. Try to go to these events. They don't have to know you have an impact helmet. You just go in there on the down low. I don't got nothing to gain from this. You feel me? That's how you do it.
All right, so we actually don't have time for any more questions. But don't forget, we have happy hour and some networking opportunities, so that's the perfect time to ask questions. Can we go ahead and give our wonderful panelists a hand? Thank you. And I have some great news, guys. Coffee is back. There are people coming up to me. It wasn't my fault. Don't shoot the messenger. So grab some coffee while we get the next panel set up, and we will see you back in your seats in about 2 minutes. when the teacher flashes the lights. Do you remember that? I was always that student that continued to talk through. So next we have Marisa Lim. Marisa is president and co-founder of Tenovox, an Austin-based company aimed to make leasing commercial real estate easy for businesses. Upon graduation from West Point, Marisa served more than 5 years of active duty with the United States Army, where she had the opportunity to serve as a company commander responsible for over 108 soldiers. We also have Kristy Abizaid. She currently leads the Supply Chains Sustainability Risk and Tools Governance organization at Dell. In her role, she oversees Dell's efforts to deliver a responsible and resilient supply chain that protects customers and workers alike. Let's go ahead and give a round of applause for Marisa and Kristy.
All right. So I think we're capping the day. We're between you guys and beer and alcohol. Hey, let's crunch in. So Marisa and I talked ahead of this conversation, and we agreed we really did want to make it a conversation. So I think what we'll do is spend a little bit of time giving each of you kind of a sense of who we are and our background. We won't spend a ton of time and bore you to death. I am super curious about everything Marisa's been involved in, so I'm going to ask her a couple questions. She'll throw some back my way, and then we'll really just open it up to a conversation with you guys. So since I started talking first, I'm going to make Maria do her introduction first. Marisa, I'm sorry.
I feel like this is like my dream Hollywood reporter style, you know? So my name is Marisa Lim, as Maria mentioned. I started out at West Point, did 5.5 years active duty. I was in Iraq, and we were in Iraq at the same time. It turns out we found out. I was in the surge of 06, 08, got out in 2010. Just like I think a few other panelists had talked about earlier, bought some time and did full-time MBA for 2 years to figure out what I wanted to do. And during that time, I realized I really liked this whole entrepreneur thing. And so this is now, Tenovox is my 4th company. And everyone's like, whoa, I'm totally ruined in the startup world. But it was 2 companies, and I told myself I'd never do it again. And then jumped into a corporate type position. I actually was working for the Department of Veteran Affairs on the benefit side. And during my time there is when the idea for Tenovox came about. And so I've been doing Tenovox now for about 2.5, 3 years now.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. So my name's Kristy Abizaid. I now work for Dell. I've been there for about 2 years, but before that, I spent 15 years in government service. I am not a veteran. I come from a family of service-oriented folks. My father was 34 years in the United States Army. You know, I'll say something to this group that you guys are probably annoyed with hearing, which is thank you for your service. And I get why everybody gets a little bit uncomfortable with that kind of broad brush thank you that you hear from so many civilians in the world. But as the daughter of an Army officer, I also know that it's not just you that's serving, but it's your friends and your families that are part of that service as well. So not just thank you to you for your service, but thanks to your entire family for really allowing you to be part of what makes this country great. So I'm up here because I've spent a lot of time in my career in government service working alongside our men and women in uniform. I started my career as a bank teller. But that happened to be the summer of 9/11. And when that happened, the service-oriented part of my blood really got fired up, and I worked however I could to find my way into the United States government. I tried to get into the U.S. government through the Postal Service, through the National Criminal Investigative Service, anything I could do to feel closer to the fight. And it ended up that I had a chance to serve as a counterterrorism analyst at the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is a mix of a civilian and military agency at the national level. And in that role, I had an opportunity to go serve in Iraq in a couple of different counterterrorism roles with General McChrystal and General Petraeus. I had an opportunity to kind of sit on the ground, but then also in the bowels of the Pentagon, and really just try and do the good work of the fight in the immediate post 9/11 environment. And for me, it was a really interesting experience of not just kind of being part of the fight, but also really learning what it was that my father had done for so many years before that as somebody who served our country in uniform. And it gave me a whole different kind of appreciation for the contribution that he made and that so many of his colleagues made. And I made working alongside the military my career for a good long time. And it was, this purpose post 9/11, this purpose of service that really drove me for many years after that. So I worked in the intelligence community for years. Then I transitioned to the policy community where I worked at the National Security Council in the Obama administration, again, working in the counterterrorism space. And then I capped my government service serving at the Pentagon once again as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Central Asia. And that was in the 2014 to 2016 timeframe. And so I think many of you can appreciate some of the debates that we were having at the time about, whether we stay in Afghanistan, in what capacity we stay, how much we continue to contribute to the mission in Afghanistan, and whether it really is fundamental to our vital national security interests. And I'm happy to talk through or debate with you why that conversation is still ongoing. I think all of us are exhausted, but also committed to so many different aspects of what that mission meant. And a lot of us have left a lot on the field there. So after that service, I moved to Austin, and I had an opportunity to actually go from living in a skiff day in and day out to holding meetings at the Capitol factory on a beanbag chair. It was a really awesome and terrifying transition where I served for the Secretary of Defense as his liaison here in Austin for the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. I think now you guys are the Defense Innovation Unit. And there, that was my first exposure outside of these kind of really boring hierarchical institutions. It was my first exposure to what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And to see how many veterans, especially in Texas, especially in the Austin area, were so vital to the entrepreneurial spirit that really makes up Austin was a pretty cool thing to me. And so I did that through the end of the administration, and when I got out, I was committed to making this transition to the private sector. I figured I didn't want to be a government bureaucrat my whole life, but I didn't know how to make that transition. I kind of fell into the transition because I sat next to the right guy on the right airplane. But my biggest concern, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, my biggest concern with leaving government service was how I find purpose in something else, right? And I think a lot of us feel that way. How do you still stay connected to a mission? How do you still get surrounded by people that really care about what they're doing, not just how much they're making? And I had a very kind of distorted view of what the non-government world looked like. And so I feel really fortunate to have landed at Dell, which is a company that I kind of jokingly call the Boy Scout of the tech industry. They're a company that's really ethical. They really care about their responsibility to the country, to their customers. And the role that I play in Dell is I manage a couple of different missions, but most important to this group, our social and environmental responsibility missions in our supply chain, which is really about making sure that our network of 36,000 suppliers adheres to our pretty high standards as a company in terms of their ability to do business with us in both social realms and environmental realms. I also lead part of the organization that runs our supplier diversity program. and we can talk a little bit more about that, but that supplier diversity program is about how we work as a giant multinational corporation, intentionally work with diverse suppliers, entrepreneurs, non-traditional suppliers, suppliers in historically underutilized businesses, veteran-owned businesses. How do we grow a supply base that is as diverse as the customer set we seek to serve? And then I do risk and resilience. And so it's funny to me how similar supply chain operations are to military operations. We've got, I don't know, 7 or 8 different organizations within the supply chain that are responsible for different things. And I swear to God, it mirrors the joint staff structure or the Army staff structure, or, right, we've got a 2, we've got, a 3, we've got the commander. And it's a really regimented and a really interesting place to work to see kind of a results-oriented group that, again, is really mission-focused and focused on things like how we protect the business and how we protect our customers against threats near and far. So it's a place I still get to touch the kind of geopolitical world, the policy world I used to know and love, but also the operational world that so many of you guys are well familiar with. So I went longer than my colleague here, so I'm going to let her talk a little bit more.
Well, I think what you touched on, and I think that's a little bit of the differences when I got out versus when you got out, as far as like you really wanting to deliberately find that purpose.
Yep.
Whereas, and I don't know, maybe because I was at West Point at 18 years old and I just wanted nothing but to like get out and figure out but I had no idea. I didn't know what I wanted to do, I don't think. I had no idea that the importance of the purpose. When we're in the military, we're always joking like, man, we could make so much more money doing this in the outside world, right? And I'll admit, maybe that was, candidly, some of that was, kind of at the forefront of my mind when I got out. But I quickly realized, very quickly, within a couple years, is that isn't, the important thing. And I think dealing with, post 9/11 PTSD and some of the other things kind of just came up around that time. The importance of purpose was at the forefront of my experience then. And that's actually why I went back and I worked for the VA, because out of all the jobs that I saw at the time in the market, that was the one thing that I could get me out of bed every single day. And before that, like, nothing else was getting me out of bed. And as I've evolved into Tenavox, and as I was transitioning into Tenavox, I knew that if I was going to take that risk from a security standpoint, and the secure job with benefits and good salary, and put it all out there, take a much less salary, and who knows where this is going to go, I knew that there had to be that purpose. And I'm so fortunate. It's been a journey for me, but a winding journey to find and do what I love to do every single day. I feel extremely lucky now, but it took me a little bit to get there.
Well, so talk a little bit more about that. Like, how did you actually break through, right? Going from, the military, leaving, going back to the Department of Veteran Affairs, which I'm sure was its own giant bureaucracy that nobody ever wants to touch. Talk to me about how you get into this entrepreneurial spirit that you've done again and again and again.
Yeah, when I was in grad school, I did get recruited to corporate companies, but it just so happened that my cousin, I was at TCU in Fort Worth, and my cousin was in Dallas, bootstrapping his own company. And he was like, do you want to, check this out? And I was like, sure. And I jumped in, and I mean, they were like freshly bootstrapped, like had like one client. And I spent the summer basically helping them build their pipeline, and quickly realizing that the skill set that I had from the military, just setting up systems, hiring people, leadership, and all of those things that come naturally to us as veterans, I mean, that was all part of this, but you were building this, thing that you kind of envisioned. And I think that was so cool to me, was the idea of having an idea, a vision, and being able to build on that from nothing, extremely nothing. And I got hooked. And so my first company was actually a development shop. I started a company with a fellow veteran, and neither of us knew anything about software development, and we were a development company. But I mean, you know, back then it was very intimidating because there wasn't Bunker Labs, there wasn't this network that we have. It was extremely intimidating and lonely to walk into a room of technologists, as someone called earlier, and they're like, "What did you do?" And I was like, "Well, I went to Iraq. It has nothing to do with what we're doing today, but I promise I have skills, you know." And communicating what those skills were, I had no idea how to do at that point. And I guess everyone's ears are different sizes,
Yes,
so
apparently.
I got it. And so I did that, but then that first business, you know, even though we figured it out, it just wasn't scalable. We learned, and you know, one of the first lesson I learned with that business was when you see it that it's not going to have the scale or go to market that you think it's going to have, stop. I milked that baby because I was just so attached to it. And I think as entrepreneurs, it's like it really is like your baby. You just don't want to let go. And I, you know, had a lot of money and my savings go down the drain for probably 6 to 8 months when I could have saved that. So I moved on from that onto another company, actually, ironically, in the industry that I'm in now, and trying to solve the problem in a different way at the time that I saw, and from my first company learned the way we're solving this problem isn't going to solve it. And so I was only with them for like about 6 to 8 months. And to be candid, I needed to make money again because I drained all my savings from Iraq into my first company. And so I didn't mention this earlier, but I ended up going back to school and got a MPA here at the Lyndon B. Johnson School. So when I met the undersecretary for the VA, and she's, you know, like, "What are you doing?" And in so many words, I was like, "I'm not doing anything." And you know, she gave me this job, and my job was really cool. It was essentially program development. So all of the claims processing on the benefit side, we were responsible for digitizing and making that more efficient. And she gave me kind of some of that autonomy to, hey, come up with an idea, figure out how to get it funded, and then execute it. And to have that in a government job was super special. And the only thing was I quickly realized how slow everything works. And because it was so slow, I was able to kind of do some stuff on the side outside. And then, you know, that's when Tenavox came about. But that really made me realize was entrepreneurship is what I love to do. Like, this is who I am, and this is my passion. And, you know, I'm not going to say I'm never going to go to corporate America or do anything like that. Never say never. But, you know, I think I will always end up back in this world.
Yeah. Well, I recognize we're getting the hook for question and answer, but before we do that, let me just.
I guess we should talk about diversity.
Yeah, yeah. I thought maybe we'd like go to the title of the
Yeah.
actual presentation that we have here. And you mentioned to me, so I already explained, you know, part of the work that I do at Dell is really trying to find and make connections with underrepresented businesses, underrepresented voices in our supply chain to bring them in and actually benefit from the good ideas and interesting entrepreneurial experiences that they have to make us a better company as a whole. You mentioned when we first met that you had some kind of breakthroughs that you had to do from a, you know, female trying to get into the system, whether it's the entrepreneurial system or otherwise. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences from that perspective, from the diversity perspective?
Yeah, I think it's all about, I mean, confidence is I was not confident at all going into this role, not really knowing as much about the industry, being CEO of this company, walking into rooms with, you know, industry experts that are a very different demographic than me, and most aren't veterans at all. And so I had to really learn, you know, not only my skill set and our skill set as veterans of learning things really fast and executing and being confident in that, but really being confident in my leadership style. In in my world and in the startup world, obviously most are white men. And I've literally had potential investors look at me and my co-founder, who is a white man, who is a bigger voice than me, talks a lot more than me. And because they're used to seeing a certain, person looking a certain way, acting a certain way, they prescribe that as what they feel leadership is. I think my experience in the military, we have our rank, so there is that, and you really do have to, be more confident, I feel, in this side of the world. But really, being confident in that, this person had, talked to me for 2 minutes and has no idea, what it is to be a real leader, and that, as a woman, for example, I don't have to be the biggest person in the room. In fact, that was one of the earliest things I learned in West Point was if I was gonna talk like the guys and yell and, portray those characteristics, then I wasn't gonna be effective. You have to be effective in your own authentic way, whether, whoever you are. And at the end of the day, it's all about inspiring and motivating people. And so the importance of that, along with confidence, is something that I've definitely grown in the last couple years.
Yeah, confidence and authenticity really matter. And just as somebody that's made this transition out of government into the corporate world, what I hear all the time in corporate America is how rich a commodity veteran experience is. And there's a ton of recruitment, and there's a ton of desire from multinationals, others, to support the veteran community. But when you ask why, they can't really articulate why, right? Why do you want to hire veterans? Is it to do a good thing? Is it because you think they're really effective? Is it because they come with lots of training? And the answer is very mushy depending on who you're talking about. And so just, one of the things that I would say to each of you as you're looking to transition into an entrepreneurial role, whether you already are entrepreneurs and you're looking to work with big companies like Dell, is that you should do that translation for them, because it's obvious. You've got kind of an open door that companies really want you to walk through, and it's not hard to make the case, but you're gonna have to do a little bit of translation to make your experience relevant to this other world, because there's not enough veterans in leadership positions and decision-making positions in the corporate world to make that connection for themselves. And so, one, being you. Two, being willing to leverage your military background, your military experience, all of the training that came along with it, all of the hard shit you went through as a part of it. All of that is just good to be upfront about. And I think you'll find a really receptive audience when you give them the opportunity to understand a little bit more about what you bring to the table.
The last thing I want to add to that, and that was a great point, Kristy, is how natural, if you really think about it, entrepreneurism comes to veterans. And Shane Walsh here and I, 2 years ago, talked about this in the sense that, other than the leadership that we just talked about, we are bred to strive in environments of uncertainty. And if you think about the world of a startup founder, talk about uncertainty. But just like in the military, we have no control of the enemy. We have no control where the shots are going to get fired. We have no control of the weather. We have no control of if our weapons are going to work. And that translates into this world, so directly. And just remember that we have those skills, and we're already used to these environments and striving in these environments.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've talked amongst ourselves a little long. So what questions do you guys have before we let you get to drinks and more socializing?
All right, we'll start back here.
Hi, my name's Paula. I'm here as a civilian. I'm an employer, and we're employing. My company is QCUE.com. We've also just started a incubator program. We're just testing that out. But anyway, my question is not necessarily related to that. I think from the first panel that we had, it was Kelly that said, by the time you go to seed funding, you should have at least $250,000 already, and ask your friends and family. And I can imagine that feels like quite a bit of a barrier to people, particularly coming out of the military who are starting their own businesses. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are and advice is for getting that company going when maybe you don't have friends and family with tens of thousands of dollars to give you.
That's a great question. Yeah, my advice is always to, try to bootstrap on your own as much as you can. In our instance, we actually didn't, and we were very lucky, through my business partners' real estate partnerships and my own connections to, bootstrap the very beginning, but beginning funding for Tenavox. But, I do encourage, there's a lot of organizations out there, last year, even though we raised, we didn't figure out a go-to-market right away, and we were running out of money. And this time last year, actually earlier, beginning of last year, our initial go-to-market did not work, and I was literally almost running out of money, like every month, and that is not a cool feeling to have. And what we ended up doing was we just hustled. I entered in pitch competitions, just networking, and it was like 2 pitch competitions for us that just kind of turned it all around. I hate pitch competitions personally. It's a lot of vulnerability that goes into it, and talking about your idea in front of people that when it hasn't come true yet. But it really, helped me improve, obviously, my confidence, but to see that, oh, these other people, can see my vision and believe in it. So, there's other programs. Bunker Labs was a direct assistance in my company in getting funding as well.
The other thing I'd add, there's a whole ecosystem of support that isn't just your family and friends that you can try and leverage. I think Bunker's a really good example. For big companies like Dell, the kinds of things that we look to do is work through certification bodies that can help us find the right match for the kind of business needs we have. So National Veterans Business Council, our Business Development Council is one of our partners on veterans. Disability In, which actually has routed to us a lot of service-disabled veteran suppliers. Those kinds of organizations often kind of don't feel all that relevant, especially when you're bootstrapping and just trying to start out. But they can also be a pretty useful resource and a pretty good opportunity to connect with big players if you're ready to connect with those big players.
In the beginning too, it's also, and what I did a lot was finding investors that invest in your industry. And you could go on Crunchbase or whatever, and just meeting, or talking to people, whether it even be not even investors, people in their portfolio similar in your industry of how they raised money. That saved me a lot of time, as well as looking outside of the state of Texas. There's very different investment theses on the coasts than there are the rest of the country, I feel. So that's another option for you as well.
All right, we have time for one more question, but have no fear, there's going to be networking time. So anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? No? Cricket? Okay.
Come on, don't leave us hanging.
Yeah.
One more.
Ready for the drinks, I get it.
I know.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, all right.
What's the last good book that you read that's relevant to this?
For me, for entrepreneurism in general, The Traction Gap by Bruce Cleveland. He's got a fund called Tech Wildcatters or Wildcat Ventures, and really from a scaling standpoint and pitching your company to investors, past that, this is just this is the total addressable market. Really thinking through operationally how you're going to scale and how do you communicate that. It's a great book.
It's not directly related to this topic, but The Fifth Domain is a really interesting book about how the cyber landscape and kind of the gray landscape in terms of nation-state competitions and threats across the cyber security world has shifted over time, and how startups, how companies now bear more and more responsibility to kind of own that themselves. And especially in today's day and age, we're really focused on not just working with small businesses, but working with secure small businesses. And to the extent that all of you are thinking about that on the front end of how you build your overall story, I think that's going to be a more and more critical component over time. So that's a big thing for us. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. If we can go ahead and give Christy and Marisa a hand clap. Thank you. All right, so we are getting ready for our networking opportunities. So if you are at the tabletops, if you can go ahead and start clearing those off, because we are going to utilize those for the next exercise. And if you'd like, go ahead and take a break, grab some water, grab more coffee. I know it's been a long day, but we still have some exciting things coming up, and we'll get started here in about 6 more minutes. Networking, networking, networking. Look, networking is already happening. I hear it. That's okay. I'm not going to interrupt it. However, excuse me. Hello. I don't want to have to use my big girl voice. I'm going to introduce Miss Shady De Jesus next. Don't worry, there'll still be opportunity to network. There's not another panel. It's all networking now. So next we have Shady De Jesus, who is going to go over our networking opportunities.
Hi guys, how are you today? So I'm one of the city leads along with Ian Falau, which is right over there with